today.
Well, we've been talking about the fact that when a man and a woman get married, there's a new entity created. And we see that from the words of the Bible where it says, help me, sorry.
And God created him,
male and female.
He created them.
There was a him and there was a her. There was also a them, an entirely new entity. And this is totally unique. You know, very often I'm on the other side of the country from my children. Doesn't change our relationship in one bit. They're my children, I'm their mother. They could be on different parts of the country from each other. They're still siblings. That is a relationship that exists whether you are close or whether you are far. Not so for husband and wife, particularly in the early years, before there is a deep spiritual connection. That physical closeness is absolutely imperative. You have to, and that's very important, especially in today's day when there's so much travel for work. And this is one of the most important questions I would discuss with someone before getting married. What is reasonable? In other words, what level of sacrifice will we sacrifice our proximity for a job, for a financial? And you know what? If it's too much, you're going to end up without a marriage. That is really, especially at the beginning, you need that proximity. You have to become one unit. And the way you become one unit starts with being together physically.
And that's exactly right. And what's so important about that is that we use a phrase very commonly, and I don't think we give enough thought to where this comes from and what it's actually about, what's really happening there. And the phrase is sleeping together, right? We think of it merely as a euphemism for actual physical intimacy. But sleeping together is really a mark of this kind of proximity we're talking about. In other words, if my job, my boss comes to me and says, listen, we can give you a 20% raise, but you're going to have to sleep elsewhere. You're going to have to travel 20 days a month. Now, is that worth it or isn't it worth it? And as you said before, couples need to discuss things like that up front. In other words, are we willing to make the necessary financial sacrifices in order to maintain this proximity, to make it possible for us to sleep together, not necessarily sexually, but the idea of being together, this closeness, because when you're asleep, there is a vulnerability. When you're asleep, my goodness, you can't defend yourself, you can't protect yourself. And so being willing to sleep with somebody else is a tremendous intimacy. It's a closeness, emotional as much as anything else. And this is why there is that beautiful section in chapter 28 of Genesis where Jacob goes on a journey to escape the anger of his brother Esau. And he arrives at this place and the sun is going down and he takes stones and he puts them down and he lays himself down to rest. Middle of the night, he has a dream. Angels coming up and down a ladder that reaches all the way to heaven. And he wakes up in a start and he says, my goodness, I had no idea. This is God's place. And sure enough, by the way, it's later where the temple in Jerusalem is built. Turns out to be that very place. So he says, this is God's place. And you sort of get the impression he's saying, I'm so sorry I went to sleep, God. Had I known that this was your house, I would never have gone to sleep here. You know what he does then? Goes back to sleep. Because the next verse says, and in the morning he woke up. It's weird, isn't it? What's going on there? I went to sleep, dreamed, oh my God, this is God's place. I don't want to go to sleep here. Good night, going back to bed. Big difference. The first time, he just went to sleep unthinkingly. He was tired, he went to sleep.
You're on a bus and you nod off.
You nod off, exactly, taking a nap. I'm not deliberately. But the second time, he was trying, as it were, to sleep with God, to put himself in God's arms, to expose his vulnerability. He wanted to sleep in this place. And that's why it is that later on in the Torah, we read about the pilgrimage feasts in Jerusalem, Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles. One of the requirements is that the pilgrims must sleep the night in Jerusalem. You can't come in the morning and leave in the nighttime. You've got to stay overnight because sleeping over is an act of intimacy. It's part of exposing yourself and being associated in a very intimate way with the other person.
I don't want to be vulgar, but in a lot of relationships today, and you read about this on college campuses, people don't want to spend the night.
Oh, yes.
They want to have a physical relationship, and they want to go out with, and then, end up in someone's bed. But they don't want, there's a discomfort with spending the night. They leave right after the act, because
That's right.
it is to wake up with someone, to lie there when you're not conscious, is incredibly intimate with another person.
Yeah, that's exactly, very much the case. And so, unlike...
That's one of the comforts that a marriage gives you.
Yes.
It allows you. You have to learn to grow into that intimacy.
You know what's cute? I've heard some of our kids saying it. It's so nice that they feel at ease saying this. I can't wait to be married so I don't have to sleep by myself.
Well, because they grew up sleeping with a bunch of siblings.
Yeah, right. But it's kind of cute, because they obviously mean it innocently,
Yes.
but they just mean it's not nice to have to sleep by yourself. That's all there is to it. And that's part of it. So here we are discussing how two become one, and how disturbing it can be if either husband or wife uses language that suggests that they're still seeing themselves as independent and isolated. So there's something wonderful when I'm invited somewhere. Can you come over next Wednesday night? I say, hold on, I'm going to have to check with my wife. That's a good thing, right? That's not a bad thing. It means, hey, maybe she's going to see some of her girlfriends that night, in which case I can definitely get together with you, or maybe we have other plans, but we're a unit. I have to take her into account, she takes me into account. But isn't there such a thing as too much togetherness?
Only of the wrong kind. There's actually a law, and this is a law that is taken out of the fact when the priests would go into the temple, their garments had bells on the bottom. So they would be tingling. You would hear a priest coming. Well, God knew they were coming. They're coming into the temple. I mean, God really knew they're coming. He doesn't need to have their bells tinkling to let him know someone's coming. But from that, we get actually a law in Jewish life, which is that if a woman is home in her home and her husband is coming home, he has to announce himself, whether it's ringing the doorbell or whether it's whistling in a certain way. He can't just walk in on her, because there is an acknowledgement that, yes, she's entitled to gather herself together. She's entitled to feel that she was private in her own home, and that he can't just expose her. So it's a mutual thing.
That's right. My father always used to have a unique honk on the horn. As he pulled into the garage, he'd always let fly with a horn. I'm sure the neighbors loved it.
And my father had a special whistle that as he was coming up the stairs, we would hear.
That's right. So that way you're not just walking in. There's a respect for the other person. That's exactly right.
But in your calculations, it's not me. I'm not still a me.
Yes.
I'm now a we.
Very important.
Certainly to the external world. To each other, there's an I that only the other one knows. But to the outside world, they don't know us so well. They shouldn't know us intimately. They know us as a we.
Yes, that's very important. And the fact that a husband and wife delight in one another's company completely openly, to the point where kids will sometimes roll their eyes and say, oh, not again. And that's again something that we see so clearly, and the story is brought out so eloquently in Genesis chapter 30, where what happens is Leah's son, right, Jacob's eldest son, Reuben, is gathering some mandrakes, some sort of fruit. It doesn't matter exactly what it is. And he brings them to his mother Leah, and Rachel says, oh, give me some of those mandrakes that your son collected. And Leah's in a sort of bitter mood, and she reacts and she says, isn't it enough that you have taken the entire affection of our husband, and now you want to take these few little fruits that my son gathered as well? And Rachel says, you know what, you're right about that. That was unfair. Tell you what, he was supposed to be with me tonight. Let him be with you rather tonight. And Leah says, oh, terrific, thanks. Okay, here are the mandrakes, I'll be fine. And so there's a delight in being with their husband. They love that. And the proof that God loves it too is that the son that was conceived that night, was Leah and Jacob's son Issachar. And Issachar is one of the great sons of the 12 sons. As a matter of fact, he's singled out in the first book of Chronicles as the son who was wise. He knew the Torah and he understood times. In Hebrew, Yodea Itim. He knew and understood the times. That was the son that was the product of this passionate love between Leah and her husband Jacob. And this is so central that there is this togetherness in every possible way, but at the same time there is a respect. I mean, I can't stand some of these very fancy houses where the bathroom is open plan.
Yeah, you
it's
gotta
bizarre,
wonder.
isn't it, where there is no way for a husband or a wife to go into a bathroom and close the door because they make them without doors. I think the trend is fading away.
Yeah, I don't think most people like that, actually.
It's really
you had to be in academia to think that would be a good idea.
You had to be an intellectual. it's a bizarre idea. But anyway, that would be an example of abolishing the privacy that is natural and appropriate in a marriage, but nonetheless,
but from the outside world, the privacy is around the couple,
yes.
not
no outside
around the individual.
No outside intrusion, that's right, into the structure of their marriage from the outside. That is absolutely central, and that is absolutely vital. And that's a large part of what we're talking about and explaining, particularly on this audio CD set that comes with a study guide. We're so proud of